Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're with us today. I have a special guest. Her name is Kathy Justice Jones, and she is the creator of the Mother Justice Network, which is a website and system for victims of domestic violence. She's also the survivor of domestic violence, and she's a domestic violence educator. So she's going to talk to us today about what domestic violence is, how to get out of domestic violence situations, things to think about, and also how to support people that we love and care about that are involved in domestic violence situations. With that, let's get to Kathy.
It's nice to be here, and I appreciate being asked.
Yes. Well, okay. So domestic violence, I think this is such an important topic. And so often people don't recognize what domestic violence is or what it can entail. And so then I find that a lot of people don't recognize that the relationships that they're in could be actually domestic violence. Do you find that too?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it starts with the concept of being called domestic violence. People assume that
Mhm.
because that word violence is in there, that it automatically means physical assault or
Yes.
something so egregious that it
Mhm.
leaves permanent damage, and just that's just not always the case.
Yes.
Um, so the other day I was watching a video of Sally Field's 6 most dreaded actors to work with. And one of them was Burt Reynolds. And I was listening to her describe that relationship in detail. And I was saying to myself, honey, you were in an abusive relationship. But I know Sally Fields being Sally Fields, she would be like, I wasn't a victim. And there's a difference. Like
Mhm.
you can refuse to incorporate the label of victim onto your personhood and
Yes.
still be a target of somebody else's violence. And so anyway, if
Yeah, that's
you
such an important notation there of like recognizing that difference.
right.
Yeah. So talk to me about like when we think about domestic violence, what does it look like? What can it, especially as we said, beyond the physical abuse, which is what people normally picture first, like you mentioned. So what else can it be? What else can it entail?
Well, um, to answer that question as succinctly as possible, many years ago, I created what I call the maze of coercive control. And I did that in an effort to, first of all, create like a 1 page training tool that people could look at and say,
Mhm.
oh my God, this is what it entails, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted it to incorporate the vast majority of the survivors' experiences.
Mhm.
Of course, before I created my maze, there was the power and control wheel, which was kind of the gold standard, if you will, at the time of like explaining in visual format what domestic violence looks like. But
Mhm.
I found it to be, even though I love Ellen Pence, the creator of the Power and Control Wheel, she was just an amazing woman and individual. I found that wheel to be just lacking in so much. And so I created the maze of coercive control. And one of the things that almost immediately you see when you see the maze of coercive control, and I have a copy of it. I don't know if I have the ability to share it. But oh no, I don't want to leave site. Cancel. Can I share screen? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't play around with this. You can go onto my website and look
Yeah,
up the maze
we'll
of coercive control.
we'll make a link.
And the first thing that's almost immediately obvious is that you have to have 2 things to have to have a domestic violence perpetrator. And one of those two things is not a victim. Okay.
Mhm.
In order to have a perpetrator, you have to have the perpetrator themselves, who come with a set of belief systems and attitudes and tactics. And
Okay.
then you have to have a complicit community that stands behind the perpetrator, even though they claim they don't want to see domestic violence in their community.
Mhm.
Um, and the complicit community is kind of made up of the flying monkeys and the institutions and the systems
Mhm.
that uphold patriarchy and kind of use the common law. Our legal system was built on British common law. Of course, when it was transferred from Great Britain to here in the United States, women were still property.
Mhm.
And things haven't changed since the 1600s. Women and children are still property legally in the United States today. And it has only been getting worse over the last few months. So, you know, im- immediately, the maze of course of control, you see all kinds of onion layers of really what is entailed in the experience of being targeted by somebody else's violence.
Mhm.
If we're talking about intimate partnerships and family systems. And you can have a perpetrator of domestic violence and not have a victim in the picture.
Mhm.
It is possible for somebody to be a predator who does not have a current victim.
Yes.
So, one of the skills that I have is being able to observe the totality of person's behaviors, to be able to see, like, is this somebody who is likely to be a perpetrator of domestic violence or not.
Mhm.
And one of the first, like, easily accessible tools, there's a woman out there by the name of Jack Patrici. She is an author. She is a founder of her own program called Growing a New Heart. But she developed this tool called um, abusive values. And going on the website, A Call for Change, they do have that abusive values list there. It's brilliant. It's short, sweet, to the point, and it's very demonstrative of like the inherent belief systems that abusers have
Mhm.
that kind of grow, um, uh, that kind of enmesh a victim in a relationship where she doesn't necessarily realize that she has become enmeshed in an abusive relationship.
Mhm.
I always want to be very careful of the words that I use. I think enmeshment is used far too often in the context of domestic violence, and I just want to make it clear: victims of domestic abuse, family violence, are in no way responsible for the abuse that is done to them. They don't ask for it, they don't allow it. In fact, every victim I've ever worked with has found really unique ways to resist and to try to get around the abuse that's
Mhm.
done in a safe manner. Anyway, I think I'm bouncing a
No,
lot.
you're
I
great. I mean, it's
apologize for
yes,
that.
there's so much to be said around this topic. Yes.
There is.
Yeah.
And so one of the acronyms that I like to use in describing perpetrators of domestic violence is the acronym PRICK. PRICK. P stands for hang on a second. Blonde. The blonde is real. Okay. P stands for premeditated.
Mhm.
R stands for repetitive. I stands for intentional. C stands for conscious. And K stands for knowing the victim's triggers, vulnerabilities, and challenges.
Okay.
Okay. And, I can go into more detail about each of those factors, but I think that that really succinctly describes the fact that perpetrators of domestic violence absolutely 100% are conscientious, like, they know what they're doing from start
Mhm.
to finish in order to wrap their victim in their web.
Mhm.
And yeah, so prick for
Yeah, I think that's clever. Okay, so let's talk about, oftentimes, like, let's say it's not us that's in a domestic violence situation, but like maybe a friend or something. And so I think a lot of times it's hard to see if you're not in it. Like if you're not there when the hurtful, abusive behaviors are happening, what can we look for? Like how can we see signs, or are there things that we can see if we're just observing
Yep.
people?
So again, I'm going to point you towards another brilliant trainer and kind of mother in the domestic violence work. Her name is Lydia Walker. Very different from Lenore Walker, who created the cycle of domestic violence. So Lydia Walker came, she was a program, I think, from a program in Arkansas, I'm pretty sure. And she came up with a list of signs to look for in an abusive personality.
Mm.
And that list is on my website. And so, it starts out with things like excessive jealousy and the need to control, and does harm to animals or to children, or uses playful violence in sexual encounters. Hang on a second, I have the list here. Jealousy, controlling behaviors, quick involvement. That's a huge one. Perpetrators, they know that they kind of have a shelf life on their good behavior. And
Mhm.
so they really need to drag their victim across the victim's point of no return as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
And so you'll get a lot of stories around, like, he was pressuring me, he was love bombing me,
Mhm.
he wanted to get married so quickly. And the point of no return, if I might briefly, that is like the perpetrators kind of interview their targets to see what that point of no return is going to be different for every single woman. For some women it is getting engaged, for other women it's having a child together, for some women it's moving in together. But that perpetrator has kind of interviewed their target to have an understanding of what point do I need to drag her past as quickly as possible so that she will find it harder to leave me.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons why perpetrators like to make the victim dependent, or make the target dependent on them, is so that it's harder for that victim to leave on her own resources
Mhm.
or under her own steam. So, unrealistic expectations, isolation is a huge one, isolating the target from family and friends. Um, Perpetrators like to blame others for their own problems, and they like to blame others for their own feelings. Abusers are easily insulted, so they have a hypersensitivity about them. They're easily insulted in that their feelings are hurt when they're really just angry.
Mhm.
Cruelty to animals or children, I covered that already. Verbal abuse, rigid sex or gender roles, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality, past abuse. Like if there's any hint of, oh yeah, my last girlfriend got a restraining order against me, but she's such a whack job, like run in the other direction. Threats of violence, and then breaking or striking objects. Those are all those are not like the end all be all list, but they're certainly a very good list to start with of behaviors that we can be looking for. And
Yeah.
if you're the person who's concerned about what you're seeing, or what the potential target is telling you, talking to you about, it is never a good idea to jump in with how much you hate that abusive person.
Mhm.
The best thing to say is, I really appreciate you telling me everything you've told me today, and I'm really concerned for you. If you get to a point where you feel like you might need to do something about this, I'm going to start collecting resources and information for you. And should you ever feel the need to leave, like come up with a few solid things that you are prepared to help a victim with, You're not her savior. Don't try to be her savior, but you can certainly come up with a few certain things that you're willing to do to help that target find safety in trying to leave. But don't try to be everything to that one person, because watching a friend or family member go through domestic violence, it's exhausting for the family members and for the friends. And so there are things that you can do and you can do well. And then there are other things that it's really helpful to pull in the professionals who know how to do a solid safety plan, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, which is hard because, yeah, you do want to just like jump in and save them or be like, oh, he's such a jerk or whatever. But I think I've heard, and I don't know if this is different, but on average, it takes 7 times
Yes.
for someone to leave.
Yeah.
Like 7 attempts. Like they want to go, they're trying, but it's hard to just sever. And oftentimes the perpetrator is able to like reel them back in or convince.
Listen, it may not even be about the abuser reeling them back in. Again, if you were to take a look at my maze of coercive control, there's so many layers to a victim being able to find safety, and like every layer represents its, is representative of like its own challenges.
Yeah.
Which systems are involved that either going to promote the victim's safety or promote the abuser's continued dominance. And there are far more systems promoting the abuser's dominance than there are systems that actually promote victim safety.
Yeah.
They all think they promote victim safety, but they do not. And the family courts are a prime example, as is child protection. They're all prime examples of systems that think that they don't want domestic violence, but they step right up and help the perpetrator as soon as somebody identifies, I'm a victim of domestic violence. This is what my partner does to me. That victim is automatically put under a microscope and picked apart to prove, like she has to prove that she is somehow the victim, as opposed to taking a look at the identified perpetrator and seeing how is it that he is not reliably safe for his family.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay, so we're speaking about gender, and this is in heterosexual relationships, but are there mostly male perpetrators and female victims? Is that statistically true?
Statistically, that's the largest breakdown of perpetrators versus victims. And listen, I've been doing this work for 25 years. And do I recognize that men can be victims of female perpetrators? Yes, because I've seen it in my personal life. And I say that very cautiously because I have yet to see the layer, the extreme devastation financially, future wise, to family systems and family relationships that female targets have experienced versus male targets. And yes, men have their own challenges kind of cope with. Like I've actually seen a police officer say to a man who was being victimized, "What's the matter, dude? Can't you just control her?" And I'm like, did you really just say that?
Yes.
So yes, they have their own challenges, but I don't believe in my 25 years of experience that I have seen anything that would indicate to me. Certainly there are those persons out there that profess that women are just as abusive and just as violent as men are, and it just does not ring true, not even close. So yeah, I thank you for addressing that particular issue. When men are victims of domestic violence, they're usually victims of another man's violence. So, the ex-boyfriend who comes in and, kills or hurts the new boyfriend, or in same-sex relationships, the male perpetrator who hurts the male victim. It's very, very rarely a female perpetrator and a male victim.
Thank you for clarifying that for us, because I think it can be tricky, right? As you're encroaching this situation, or talking about this topic, is like what is really being experienced out there versus what we think might be true.
Right. Well, here's the thing. Domestic violence requires a power imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how do people have personal power in their lives? They have it through their gender, through their identity, through their sexual expression, through their finances, through
Mm-hmm.
their education, through the color of their skin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are multiple layers to power within an individual, and then within a relationship, and then within a family system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very rare for women to have power over men, especially in our patriarchy dominant society.
Yeah.
So it's really got to take an incredibly powerful woman to kind of knock out, if you will, or eliminate the presence of power for the men in the relationship, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I can think of one woman in particular, who this was in the years when I was acting as a liaison between my local domestic violence crisis center and the local child protection office. And there was this family who came kind of under my scope, and the woman, she was kind of shorter, but she was definitely a very stocky woman. Her source of power came from the fact that her father was kind of like a big deal in the community, and so she kind of borrowed from dad's power, his financial resources, everything. She just kind of absorbed dad's power. And the man that she was in relationship with was a teeny tiny guy, like really, really slender. You could probably blow him over with a good strong wind. And she was clearly much heftier than the guy was. And she went into court and she said to the judge, and I'll never forget this, she's like, "I don't care what you tell me. You can't tell me not to see him. You can't tell me not to talk to him." They were in the middle of a restraining order hearing. She's like, "He's my husband and I'm going to do whatever the F I want with him." And like everybody was like, "Holy mackerel." And like it was so easy to hold her accountable because she was just so blatant about her behavior.
Yeah.
Which is really unusual. Like the typical savvy perpetrator is much more quiet, much more what's covert narcissism is a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot in all of this. I don't like that particular buzz phrase, but it is used a lot. So but yes, perpetrators have a tendency to be very quiet about the abuse and the control that they're kind of
wielding.
Yeah, thank you for the word.
Yes. Okay, so talk to me about, I know, like, when we think about all the potential things, I mean, I'm sure we've seen domestic violence go very poorly in the news or even within our own lives of
In real life.
Women end up being killed by the person. Maybe it's a murder, suicide, lots
Or
of
the children.
Yes, or the children are hurt or killed.
Or family members. Yeah.
Yes. There's a lot of threat, to maintain that control. So safety planning seems like a really important step in this process. So if you are in a domestic violence situation, safety planning
is critical.
Yes. Okay. Can you talk about
But
this?
there's important pieces to remember about safety planning. First of all, safety is a process, not an event.
Yeah.
You can't do a safety plan with somebody and say, "Okay, that's it. She's done. She's going to be safe." No. It's really important that safety planning become a very routine event between a target and the professionals that she's working with. It can't be a one and done.
Yeah.
And the reason is I like to equate perpetrators of domestic violence or family violence to did you ever see the movie The Incredibles?
Yes.
The machine that
Mhm.
morphs and changes with every new superhero that confronts it.
Mhm.
Perpetrators are much the same way. When they understand how the victim is getting around their rules and their control, they change their behavior to further isolate and further control the victim. And so, like, one of the things that used to drive me nuts when I was working within the child protection scope was that the perpetrator would be given a copy of the family's safety plan. And I'm like, okay, you just gave him a roadmap to sabotage her every single one of her efforts. You
Yes.
have just given her the plan to fail.
Mhm.
Because now that he knows what she's required to do, and by the way, perpetrators of domestic violence, like when I first started working um, in the child protection office, perpetrators were happy when the children were taken away from the victim. Why?
Mhm.
Because now he could have her back completely under his control
Yep.
without the bothersome nuisance of children who were begging for her time and attention. So a lot of removals took place, and child protection would be like, where did we go wrong? Like, what did we do to not support this mom? Like, well, you started with giving him a copy of the safety plan.
Mhm.
Not a good idea.
Yeah.
So safety planning has to be a regular event. Like every time you meet with somebody who's being targeted, you have to just kind of do a check-in with her, like what's working, what's not working, what are the things that she's doing to get around him that he doesn't know, how can you enhance those survival mechanisms, and what has he sabotaged, and how can you put some more safety mechanisms around the efforts that he is sabotaging.
Can you give some examples of like maybe a situation and how somebody could like how, because I'm thinking like can somebody who is being targeted by a perpetrator, can they create their own safety plan, or does it really need to be in conjunction with someone else?
It doesn't need to be in conjunction with somebody else. You can create your own safety plan. There are templates online. I believe I have one on my website.
Okay.
I have one for like physical safety as well as for like economic and electronic safety. Um, and so certainly you can use those templates. Um, but I find that safety planning is one activity that it's actually helpful to have more heads rather than fewer.
Yeah.
Only because with each individual's limited experience, you only think so far as to like, hey, how can I get around this particular barrier?
Hmm.
But somebody else may have done something that worked for them. It might not work for you, but at least being offered the suggestion and the pros and the cons of what it was that they tried might give you insight as to something that you could try too.
Yeah.
But it is possible to do it on your own. It's really the biggest barrier to somebody doing a safety plan on their own is their own sense of confidence. Like,
Sure.
am I smart enough? Can I
Hmm.
do this? I have no doubt that each individual target is smart enough, resourceful enough to be able to create their own plan. I love the women that I have worked with over the years. It's amazing to me how resourceful they have been
Yeah.
in the ways that they kind of collect everything that they need to create safety for themselves and their children. Um, the so are they confident? And then the other thing is listen to that still small voice. You as the target, you know absolutely every factor that goes into what drives him like angry.
Hmm.
What like what are the times that you feel safest when he is in the home? What are the times when you feel are in most danger? Um, I will say to somebody, listen, I'm an expert in general domestic violence. But even I can get it wrong. If I say something to you and you're like, no, that's not going to work for me, just tell me why it is that it won't work for you so that maybe I can try to find a way around that, or I can say, nope, we got to hang this one up and go at the problem from another direction. That victim is the absolute expert in her life. And
Yeah.
if she's saying, no, I can't do XYZ, the professionals around her absolutely need to honor that and say, okay, what else can we do?
Mm-hmm.
But that victim needs to be told to listen to her gut, because her gut will never, ever, ever steer her wrong.
Yeah. Well, and they've been in it, right, long enough to know where you go wrong, because they've been, attacked or
Or
removal of
sabotaged.
supports or sabotaged, right?
Yep.
Like trying to navigate through it. So yeah, that makes sense. So making a safety plan is important. So, and I think that probably brings up lots of like logistical barriers, and just the emotional barriers, right? Like sometimes even when you have a perpetrator that's doing things that you don't like, you can still love them.
Yep.
And that part can be so tricky because you still have feelings
Yep.
about them in a positive way, maybe also negative. And so like how do family members or friends or communities better support people in that situation, like with these obstacles? How can we help?
Well, as an example, like I like to say to the women that I'm talking to, listen, I understand that you still love him. You, one of the reasons that he was attracted to you was because of your kindness and your generosity and your forgiving spirit. There were many qualities that attracted him to you. And I don't want you to lose those qualities, because those are wonderful qualities to have. But and it's not reasonable to expect that you're just going to turn those feelings off
Sure.
because he's done something that you don't like. I said, it's okay that you still love him, but I'm just asking you to love yourself a little bit more, to be able to say to yourself, I love him, but right now it's more important that I am safe. And
Mm-hmm.
so I need to do what I need to do for me and for my children to create safety for us, and worry about potential reconciliation or going back after he has demonstrated for a long period of time that he has capacity to change and be a reliably safe person for my family, me and my
Mm-hmm.
family. By the way, in 25 plus years of doing this work, I have only ever seen one perpetrator actually really change.
I was just going to ask you. I mean, because it's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so statistically, the odds are not good that your perpetrator is going to be the one that changes.
Sure.
And in fact, you need to kind of safety plan and go about living your life as if he's not going to change, because in fact, once you take steps to leave, he's actually going to become more dangerous, not just to you, but to your children. Particularly in the first 2 years following separation, he's going to become more dangerous to you and to your family and to your children.
So how do we people? I mean, knowing that, I mean, that's probably also an obstacle to leaving, is like, this is going to get worse before it gets better. So it'd be better if I just stayed, right? Like I can see women saying that to themselves. So knowing that it's going to get worse, obviously there's reasons to leave to keep yourself and your kids safe. So how do we as a community or friends or family protect our people, the people we love that are in this, like they want to leave? How do we help them?
So the very first thing that you need to do as kind of the sideline person is come up with those things that you're willing to do to help the victim when they come to you and say, I need help. You know, are you willing to give them, child care so that they can go to court unencumbered by children? Because very few courts, if any, allow the presence of children in the courtroom, or in the courthouse even. So, are you willing to give them childcare? Are you willing to give them rides to places? Because one of the first things that perpetrators like to do is sabotage a vehicle or sabotage the victim's ability to get around, even if it's public transportation. So, can you provide rides somewhere? Are you willing to, if not, I don't necessarily recommend providing shelter space as family or friends, especially if the perpetrator knows where you live, because that's a really awful way of putting yourself in harm's way. But are you willing to offer her a place where he doesn't know where it is? Or are you willing to offer a few hotel nights so that she can just have enough breathing space to figure out where she's going to go from there? There are so many things that friends and family can do by way of like concrete help for somebody who is looking for ways to get out. If she's saying, I'm not willing to get out right now, I just need safe, like I need to brainstorm ways that I can be safe in the moment. You've got to be willing to do that too. Like, hey, so can you take any arguments outside where there aren't any weapons like knives in the kitchen, or, where he has his gun handy nearby? Can you, and where people passing by can see that something's going on and they can call the police. I've had victims who put special lights, colored lights in their front porch. And whenever the neighbors saw that porch light go on, they knew it meant call for help because something bad was going on inside. Also, you can collect the phone number of local domestic violence crisis centers, local food pantries, local, like we have like closets in the area that provide interview clothes or things of that nature for people who are for people who are fleeing, gas cards, gift cards. There's so many ways that you can be helpful to somebody without putting yourself at risk.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the scary part, is that does happen too, where people can put themselves at risk and then dangerous things happen to them too.
All you have to do is do a quick Google search to just see how many, family, friends of family, the children are especially a regular target. There was just within the last 2 weeks, a woman who lost her 3 children, and the perpetrator's still out on the run. And that's like, it's all tragic, but I can't even imagine being that poor mother who's lost 3 children in such a horrific manner. And it just happens entirely too often. And the family courts and child protection are just so often useless in addressing domestic violence and family violence appropriately.
Yeah. Okay, so talk to me about how, obviously, this can be really large, or maybe it's more covert, but how are children in the home impacted by domestic violence, even if they're not like the direct targets of the abuse? Is it often that they are also the targets, or is it often that the mom is the target?
It's more often than not that the children are also targeted, especially after the adults have separated. So in homes where there is a perpetrator of domestic violence and children, in 2/3 of those homes, the children are being targeted. In 75 to 90% of those homes, the animals in the homes are being targeted. And in 1/3 of those homes, the children are being sexually abused. So it's very rare to have a perpetrator of domestic violence and an adult partner and children in the home where the children are not being impacted. And let's say, for argument's sake, that the children aren't being physically or sexually abused in that home. Studies have demonstrated that the children who never get physically assaulted, let me reverse that the children who only witness are actually more impacted psychologically than the children who are physically assaulted. So
Fascinating.
it's not a relief
Mm-hmm.
for children to not have been physically or sexually assaulted. In fact, the community will rally around the children who have been physically assaulted, who have been sexually assaulted, and more often than not, they'll be told what happened to you was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the quickest kind of the quickest, the straightest line to healing for any survivor is being validated by their community. And so
Mm-hmm.
when children hear what happened to you was wrong, they can start that internal process that says, oh, this was wrong. This shouldn't have happened to me. And that healing process becomes um, more effectuated more quickly
Mm-hmm.
than for those children who are gaslighted into, oh, don't say that about your father. Of course he loves you. Oh, but he calls me names and he treats me like a slave in the house. And, he's always putting me down and blah blah blah. Well, don't say he doesn't love you, and don't say, for sure as heck, don't say you don't love him, because that's not right. Children's experiences of being exposed to a perpetrator in the home it's really horrific, what they've been put through in general,
Mm-hmm.
by systems and professionals who refuse to believe their stories, obfuscate what their experiences have been, and basically outright gaslight children to say, no, that didn't happen, or you're exaggerating, or whatever else.
Yeah.
So I just, do I have time? Is it okay if I were to go back? Because I don't ever think I actually answered your question about what domestic violence is. I might have said what it isn't, but
Yeah. You're
so
welcome to go back.
Kit and Ken with the concept of domestic violence is really any act or non-act can be a version of abuse. The issue isn't, is the act itself abusive, but did the target of a particular behavior consent or not to the behavior that's being
Mm-hmm.
done to her? And what level of harm is that non-consented action doing to the victim, right? So we typically think of the idea of consent only for sexualized behaviors, but no, like, let me give you a common example. Name calling. Okay, name
Mm-hmm.
calling happens in a lot of relationships, but name calling in and of itself, it's not a healthy behavior to engage in. Like, nobody wants to be called, pick your selected name. Nobody wants to be called names,
Sure.
in a derogatory or demeaning manner within the context of a healthy and loving relationship. But that in and of itself is not necessarily abuse. If you have two people who are of generally equal power kind of shouting names back and forth at each other, and it's like something that they kind of mutually participate in, um, kind of willingly, like
Mm-hmm.
nobody's saying stop calling me the C word, or stop calling me a prick. um, that they're fully engaged and yelling and screaming at each other. That's not abuse. It's not
Mm-hmm.
healthy, but it's not abuse.
Okay.
But so so I am a survivor of domestic violence. My perpetrator used to do what I call ABC name calling, asshole, the B word, the C word, the
Mm-hmm.
douchebag, like all of it. Like, I heard it all. A shitbird. Who knows what a shitbird was, but I would, like, he would call me that all the time. Um, Even though I would say, please stop calling me that. I don't like it. He would also not use my name. He would call me Miss, or he would call me the ball and chain, anything other than using my actual name. He knew
Mm-hmm.
it bothered me because it took away my personhood,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happily remarried, have been happily remarried. We just celebrated our 29th anniversary. But a long time
Congratulations.
ago,
Yeah.
thank you, my husband said to me, Like, what would you do if I ever called you, XYZ, like my ex-husband did? And I said, I'd leave. And he's like, what? Like, you tolerated that from him, but not from me? And I said, because you taught me that I could expect better.
Mm.
Right. So I learned that in the context of this relationship, this healthy relationship, I was not ever going to tolerate or consent to that kind of disrespect, that kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So, with the ex-husband, it was, please don't call me that. I don't like that. Please use my name, please. And he barreled through my boundaries. He wouldn't honor my boundaries. And so that's what made that abusive, especially because he would punctuate my requests with assaulting me or threats, that kind of thing. So I had no power to stop him, and he would demonstrate that power over me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that kind of gives you better idea of like
Yeah.
what abuse is or can be in the context of an intimate relationship. But of course, in my maze of coercive control, I have things kind of sectioned off very neatly. The things like, is there spiritual abuse? Is there economic control? Is there medical neglect? Is there emotional and verbal abuse? Is there psychological torment? Is there physical assault? Is there sexual coercion and control? I have a whole wheel of like examples of types of behaviors that or tactics that perpetrators very commonly use.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while I'll hear something from a victim like, oh, I've never heard that one before. But
Mm-hmm.
as a sister advocate pointed out to me, even ordering a cake can be abusive if it's being done in a way that the victim has not consented to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just something generally to think about. But then, you have the tactics that the abusers use, and then you have their belief systems that kind of cement the tactics, and then you have the layers of the family systems around it and the victims barriers and the systems and institutions that are collaborating with or supporting the perpetrator, the the victim blaming, the layer of victim blaming that goes on. Like, there's just so many layers that keeps the victim in, that there's actually more barriers keeping a victim in than there is help to get
Mm-hmm.
out.
Yeah.
And which is why the average victim takes 7 times to leave an abusive relationship. So
Yeah.
at very rarely, I mean, it really very rarely has to do solely with, here's the abuser who's like, oh, please come back, please come back. Does that happen? Yes, it happens all the time. But the victim is calculating, or the target is calculating, what resources do I have? And if I don't have them, where can I find resources from
Mm-hmm.
to deal with this barrier, to deal with
Mm-hmm.
that barrier? And
Mm-hmm.
more often than not, the police, the family courts, the child protection systems are acting as part of the barrier, not part of the solution.
Yeah. Well, and it's so much victim blaming too, or not understanding the complexities, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, yes, they want to do well. No one's intending to keep women or anybody who is experiencing domestic violence in that relationship, except for the perpetrator. But the way that the system is set up can inadvertently do that, right? But
Well, I really appreciate I really appreciate your positive outlook on the systems that are trying to work with victims. I wish I could say after 25 years that was my experience. Are there good individuals within each system who don't want to see victims hurt? Of course, there are good
sure.
individuals, but it's really important to recognize that by and large, the systems that deal with this issue are so patriarchy heavy, are so perpetrator focused, that they are actually doing more harm to adult targets and their children than they are helping. So much so that, going back to the idea of a woman, should she stay? Is it safer to stay or to go?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, more often than not, after interviewing and talking with a victim, I'm saying to her, I really don't like saying this, but until you can put A, B, C in place, it is probably going to be safer for you to stay and for your children for you to stay than it is for you to go.
Wow.
That's how bad it is out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, people think, oh, she leaves the domestic violence is over. Wrong. The family court system is built in such a way that it is ensuring that that the adult targets are being tormented and harassed through the family court process until the day that the youngest child turns 18. And so I literally have victims, targets that I've been working with for 2 decades.
Ugh, wow. Yeah.
That's how bad it is. The abuse does not end just because the target has left. And in fact, children are the most powerful weapon that a perpetrator has to use against a victim of domestic violence. I was so lucky in my experience of survival and leaving. First of all, I had an infant daughter. Despite the fact that she was my child, not my abuser's child, biological child, the courts in the state that I was in said that because he was the only father she ever knew, that he had right to her.
Whoa.
So I had to fight for custody of my own child. And that's not an outlier. Like, I hear stories like this very frequently. So what was my point in all of that? I was saying about how lucky I was. The last time I was in the same state with my perpetrator, he was literally trying to kill me. He was telling me that he was going to go kill my daughter. He wanted me to hear her die first, and then he would come back and finish me off. Like, that's how dangerous the situation was. And I just happened to kind of leave at the right time. There was this kind of perfect storm of, there were programs out there that was talking about domestic violence and making sure that victims had support to leave, and courts were starting to be educated, blah, blah, blah. So when I got a restraining order, I had to pay $8,000 to be allowed to take my daughter out of state, but I was still allowed to take her out of state. That wouldn't happen these days, even though there's the UJCCEA something that's supposed to allow victims to leave with their children if they're fleeing for their safety. In essence, all it does is ensure that the adult victim is ensnared in the same state with a perpetrator. I've never seen it really work well to get victims out. So I was allowed to leave the state with my child. I went, it was about a 5-hour drive away to a different state, where I basically held on long enough, just like kind of kept him at bay long enough to establish residency in the new state, where I then stopped all the family court proceedings from the prior state and started the family court process in this new state that I was in. And he got tired. He got tired of traveling back and forth and decided I was more hassle than I was worth. And he finally let me go. It wasn't because I couldn't afford an attorney. I was doing all the paperwork myself. I was drafting everything myself. I couldn't, it wasn't because of brilliance. It was because he just was too damn lazy and decided I was more trouble than I was worth. So,
we need more people to give up.
Yeah. And so, when I went in front of the judge, I was like, he's like, do you promise never to become a welfare recipient, go on the state for help? I'm like, if it means that me and my daughter never have to see him again, absolutely. I'll promise you anything. I'll never, and I never did go on welfare because I was determined, no way in heck was I ever going to have this individual back in my life.
Yeah.
And that was the threat that was hanging over my head. So, but
Oh, I mean, that doesn't seem reasonable. Why did they not want you to be on state assistance to like what, how did that bring that other person back into your life?
well, because when somebody goes on welfare, welfare starts looking for the father of the children
Mm,
to pay
yes.
back the money
Hmm.
that is going towards the care.
Got it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So, um,
Yeah, there's
but the
so many nuances that are
sorry. Yeah.
ensnaring you in.
Yep. And the Violence Against Women Act was just being, um, was just becoming brand new legislation when I left my ex-husband. And so one of the provisions, at least in the state where I came from, they decided that they were going to go back X number of years. I think it was like 3 or 5 years, and that anybody who had applied for a restraining order was going to get a lifetime restraining order. And so the amazing thing was, I was given this lifetime restraining order. I had no idea it even existed. I thought that all the restraining orders that I had gotten against him had expired.
Hmm.
Um, so, like, 20 years later, when he tried to reach back out to me and my daughter again after 20 years,
Yeah.
I was like, what can I do about this? I contacted the local police department, and that police officer was like, you still have a restraining order against him. And I'm like, I do? It
Yeah.
was the most bizarre thing.
Wow.
But
It's shocking that they didn't let you know too, but
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Hmm.
But that's what I mean, like, when I say, like, I just happened to kind of survive all of this at the most opportune time for victims, because, the pendulum was swinging towards victim help
Hmm.
during the time that I was leaving, but it's very much swinging back in the opposite direction now.
Mm,
And it's become even more so, more horrific over the last 6 or so months.
yeah.
So.
Okay, so talk to me about what do you think are the most harmful myths or misunderstanding about domestic violence that you'd like to clear up or help people to understand?
Well, I hinted at it earlier with the concept of covert narcissist, and like um, narcissistic abuse is a label that's often put on abusive behaviors. And listen, I don't want to fault somebody if they get comfort from kind of that kind of concept. I don't want to say no, bad, don't do that. But I do find that it's more harmful for a target to use that kind of language than it is helpful when it comes to the systems surrounding the family.
Mhm. That's true.
Because if you don't have that title, LSCSW, or PhD, or
Mhm.
whatever else kind of degree comes along with being able to determine that somebody in fact is a narcissist,
Mhm.
systems hear that word, and again, with their propensity for putting victims under the microscope, they're like, oh, you're using that word, you must be the narcissist. I
Mhm.
in fact see that concept just twisted and turned back onto the victims time and time again. Narcissism is a sickness. Abuse is a choice. It's always the choice of the perpetrator to use control, abusive behavior, violent behavior against their
Mhm.
target. It's always something that they can help. How do I know this? Because they know when and how to control their behaviors to the community around them so that they can garner their flying monkeys and build their social equity.
Mhm. Mhm.
They know how to do this very well. And so we have to recognize that it's a choice that perpetrators engage in, these controlling and manipulative and dominating behaviors. And they do have control over their ability or not to use it.
Mhm.
Um, it's it's always in their minds how to control and dominate, even while they're sleeping. Okay. And so one of the stories that I like to pull out of my hat trick is when I was surviving my ex-husband, one of the things that he would do is he would wrap his fingers in my hair while we were sleeping. So I couldn't get up and out of bed to even go to the bathroom without him knowing, without him becoming aware that I was trying to get up and leave.
Mm,
So even while he was sleeping, he was still trying to dominate and control me.
yeah.
And that's very like that type of dominance, need to control and dominate even when the perpetrator is far away or asleep or whatever. That's very common to the domestic violence experience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just like feeling so controlled in every single tiny movement. Yeah. To not
Yeah.
even be able to go to the bathroom
Yeah.
when you're it's like sleeping. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot. Yeah. So if someone is listening to this and is feeling like kind of stuck in their relationship, and maybe they are identifying like, okay, this sounds like something that I'm in. I do think I'm in a domestic violence situation. What advice would you have for them right now?
So again, I said earlier that safety is a process, not an event.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would encourage that victim or that target to start reaching out to people that they know 100% for sure are in their corner.
Mm-hmm.
People that you're not sure about, they are not safe. And don't try to pull somebody and don't try to convince somebody or change their mind about the person who is hurting you.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find those people who are 100% solidly in your corner. And one of the really like devastating things that is important to recognize is that more often than not, a target's own family is usually not in her corner.
Mm-hmm.
And so you may have to go outside your family. You may have to go outside any circle of friends in which both of you have mutual friendships. So it's going to be really important for you to connect to the local domestic violence program, who may be able to get you connected to a community of women who are in similar circumstances to you, so that you can start sharing what are the resources out there, what are the friend groups that are out there, and start building your own team that can help support, provide a lot of emotional support. You're going to need it. You're going to need those people who understand what you're going through. And so support groups through domestic violence programs are a really good way to build that. If you don't have, not everybody has the luxury of a quickly available community or an easily available domestic violence program, especially out west where people are so isolated to begin with. There are a lot of groups online through Facebook, especially that are, and through, gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of, there's an app out there that promotes groups. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there are softwares out there and apps and programs out there that can get you connected to people that that don't require face-to-face
Mm-hmm.
meetings. And those internet groups, those social media groups are just as valuable to start building your network. Start building a network first of people who will be helpful to you. Domestic violence perpetrators really rely on isolation
Mm-hmm.
to break the victim and to keep her from anything that looks like help. And so if isolation is the poison, the antidote is connection. It's
Yeah.
really important to find, a lot of people are like, oh, faith communities. And sometimes faith communities present their own challenges to victims of domestic violence. But in my lifetime experience of faith communities, they're often very good at, providing that extra meal when you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, or
Sure.
providing that gas card for a tank of gas so that you can get to appointments and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Definitely be selective of how much you share and with whom. Domestic violence crisis advocates are really great to share information with, because by law, your communications with them have to remain confidential in most, if not all, states. If you have even an inkling that somebody that you're talking with is talking to your abuser too, do not share anything with that individual, because they are not a safe person for you. Never, ever, ever tell your abuser or connected friends and family what your plans are, because I guarantee you, as soon as he understands what your plans are, he's going to be working double time to sabotage what your plans are. And I want you to know that if he has ever refused to take no for an answer when it comes to sexual relations, and if he's ever strangled you, put his hands around your throat, even if it was just like lightly placing them, didn't even squeeze, you are 7 times more likely to die or be physically permanently hurt at the hands of your partner than the average perpetrator, okay, or than the average victim. So please understand, like, get yourself educated about really kind of the dangerousness of your perpetrator. There's a great program out there called Mosaic. It can be accessed online. I think it was created with the help of Gavin DeBecker, who wrote the awesome book, The Gift of Fear. I would recommend both of those resources for you. Mosaic is kind of, it's an assessment that you can take by yourself. If your home computers are not safe, get yourself to the local library and do the assessment from your local library's computers. But it's helping you assess the risk of your perpetrator to you and to your children. And so I definitely recommend kind of getting yourself educated about, like, what is the level of risk for me here. It's really important that you plan. It's not that you have to plan slowly, but you do have to plan carefully and plan for the long run, the long haul. Don't think, I'm in danger today, I'm going to be leaving tomorrow. It's very rare that level, that quick turnover is really successful. The best safety planning kind of has a long-term goal in mind. One of the things that I used to do, I was working in retail, and the retailers that I worked for would often give us bonuses. And so my ex would confiscate every paycheck that I got, but he didn't know about the bonus checks. And so I would go and cash them, and I stuffed the money, the cash from those bonus checks underneath the toilet cover, in the toilet. So, and that's how I personally was able to gather some monetary resources to be able to leave. Another trick that a lot of victims do is that when they're going grocery shopping, if their perpetrator doesn't follow them to the grocery store, which happens a lot, but they'll take out like an extra 20 or an extra 40 in cash on top of the purchase cost of the grocery shopping, and they'll take that money and they'll stuff it away somewhere. It's important to get yourself and get your kids 3 days worth of clothing, pack it in a bag along with prescriptions and things that you just absolutely can't leave behind, and stuff them at a friend's house. And if you don't have a friend, stuff them in the back of your car. And if you don't have a back of a car, find a shed somewhere that you can stuff these things away, so that if you have to leave urgently, that you have something available that you can grab onto and go, where at least your basic necessities are being met. I hope that made sense. I feel like I'm there's so much.
There's so many things.
So much that has to be, ultimately, if you only have one thing, or if you only remember one thing from this conversation today, I would say find the phone number for your local domestic violence program and call them and let them walk you through the process. You don't have to give them your name. You don't have to give them any identifying information. Most domestic violence crisis centers, the advocates are mandated reporters. And so if you're going to talk about the children, be very careful not to share anything that you wouldn't want to be reported to child protection. Unless you are actually honestly looking for the help of child protection. Again, I want to reiterate, I don't think that all child protection social workers are evil or have an agenda, but child protection as a system generally does not do domestic violence well. And so you really need to be cautious about how and when you access their resources.
So much to consider and to have on your mind when you're trying to leave a domestic violence situation and get yourself prepared and your family prepared and to be able to stay safe.
I've seen them do really great things. I have.
Sure.
But I would say that the hits are like 25% and the misses are like 75%.
Yeah.
And those just are not good odds.
No.
Even in cases of child sexual abuse, it's not good odds. So have a proper appreciation for whether the systems around you will actually be helpful. And the best people who can give you an idea as to what systems are helpful and which ones are not are your local domestic violence crisis center.
Yeah. And getting connected, I'm sure, to other people, other women going through the same thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. Get connected. But the reason I keep going back to the domestic violence crisis center is because they're the one system out there that exists just to help women in these circumstances.
Sure. Yes. Absolutely.
No,
and I think they're great. We are lucky in my community to have a great set of domestic violence crisis centers. And
I worked in my local program for 16 years. Ultimately, I ended up leaving because I recognized that they were less effective for protective mothers than I wanted them to be. And so I went out to create Mother Justice Network to be able to address protective mothers specifically. By definition, a protective mother is an adult victim of domestic violence who is working hard to try to keep her children safe through the family court or child protection systems. Keep the children safe from the perpetrators.
Thank you so much, Kathy. This has been such an informative conversation and so helpful. We so appreciate your wisdom and experience.
Thank you. I'm really just excited to be here and I appreciate your time.
Thanks again, Kathy. I know that I am taking away a lot of things around domestic violence to support people in my life and things to know for the future. I hope that you're taking away helpful pieces of information to help support yourself or other people that you love that are experiencing domestic violence. With that, I will say thank you so much for your time today. If you would do me a huge favor, if you think that this episode could help somebody else, will you share it with them? Will you also subscribe to our show? And if you have time, would you give us a rating? And I would love it if you would follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And also, please keep the emails coming with topic suggestions for future shows to accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Have a wonderful day.
Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.